Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles.
Chase Thornton.
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
And Admiral Rue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome back into Operation Domination for this Week 2 preview. Make sure you download us on your favorite podcast apps so you get all of our episodes on the go. You can also check out our video content when you go to the YouTube channel, Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net. You can subscribe right to the Operation Domination playlist, or you can check out any of the other great content that we have for you on the network. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mater, joined here with Admiral Rue and Chase Thornton, the three amigos in the building. First things first, gents. How do we feel about week 1? Just like a quick little recap of how we did, how we felt.
That's a nice soundbite. You're welcome, everybody. That's about how I felt about it.
Don't you worry. It was weird. It's nobody who had Zay Flowers and Quentin Johnston and all these guys finishing at the top. The only thing that panned out like it should have was the quarterbacks, right? Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Okay, cool. Great. Fantastic. Derrick Henry. Great. Fantastic. And everything else was weird. Adam, what was the biggest thing that stuck out to you?
Oh, biggest thing that stuck out to me. There's a lot of old players that I thought did remarkably well, especially early in the season where you might think like guys who took a lot of time off in training camp, guys who didn't play in preseason who started off immediately well. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the obvious one. Keenan, who just joined the Chargers, had a great day. Like a lot of old players who was like, oh, well, maybe I'm ready to write these guys off. I performed that I was surprised by.
Yeah, you know what? And there's something to that with the preseason, guys not playing nearly as much in the preseason, that maybe the older guys, because they're already been in the league for a couple amount of years, are able to get off to that faster start. Because yes, to your point, we had some exceptions with the rookies, but for the most part, the young guys really did not come through like we were hoping to. It's week 1. Things will get better moving forward. Biggest thing that stuck out to me that is Mike McDaniel's not going to make it through September. That was the biggest thing that stuck out to me in week 1. There's no way. Actually, Adam, I wanted to ask you about that because you were all like, don't want to play Daniel Jones. Colts look like a freaking Super Bowl team after that, man.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but it's what you first said. That's the takeaway. This is a Dolphins problem, not a Colts solution. I'm happy. I'm optimistic that we might have a Sam Darnold from last year's situation, but I don't think it's any more than that. I don't think that Daniel Jones is a revelation so much as it's I think Steichen can hide a lot of those flaws.
He's not the future of the franchise.
Coaching and not doing whatever it was that he was off doing last season, then we're having a much different conversation.
He definitely looked like he was back to running his offense. There's no doubt about that. Whether that did stick out to me more so than, or not, I shouldn't say more so, but along with how bad the Dolphins looked like they were in December form already here in September. That was strange. I mean, Chase, how you feel about the Packers? I mean, they had a huge win over division.
Oh, what a beautiful game. What a beautiful game. I didn't get to watch it because I was dropping my oldest off at college. So I was driving across the entire state. I had it on the radio. So I didn't get to watch it live, but what a beautiful game they played. I mean, that defense looked really nice against, the top scoring team from last season. And they really looked like they can be a complete team. I'm cautiously optimistic. Now, there were a lot of people who were down on the Lions a little bit because of losing both of their coordinators. I'm not necessarily so sure that their offense is going to be the, train wreck that it looked like on Sunday. I think they're going to be better than what they looked. You drafted your Lions, you're going to get the points out of them eventually here. But I was thrilled to see how that Packer offense looked and the defense. The defense was it was so fun watching Micah Parsons run around as fast as he is. He's a different level. He's a different level out there than anybody they've had on defense in a long time.
Yeah, $47 million man on limited snaps definitely made his presence felt. So you got to feel good about that. And
they said he fought to get on the field more than they were originally. Yeah. Like how much they used him was what he fought for. And so good for him. He wants to be out there. Apparently injury can't be that bad.
Well, you're getting paid, so you better want to be out there. I'm glad the 49ers won, but I have to say after all the injuries, I have to remind myself that we won because I feel like we're losing. But that's just where the 49ers state is.
Take solace in the fact that you don't have to deal with Jake Moody anymore, though.
Yes, that did make up for quite a bit this week. Although I don't know how much better Eddie Pinheiro is, but I'll take him over Jake Moody. That's fine. All right, so let's get into it here. We want to kick this off with some start-sit questions of the week. Again, these are some of the most popular start-sit questions that we have been seeing. So we wanted to address them and get a little fantasy info in here heading into week 2. And we have a showdown to kick off the first question. And just for the record here, I won the showdown last week over Jerry Jeudy, top 24, not top 24. I forgot to make the graphic, so Chase kind of got off lucky on this one. This debate is going to be between Adam and myself. Chase, I'll let you kind of judge it a little bit here. But the question that came in, and it's an interesting question, Travion Henderson or Emeka Egbuka, flex spot, half-point PPR. I said Egbuka. Adam said Henderson. So I'm curious to see Adam Henderson, who maybe some questions about his usage. Didn't look, did okay, but didn't look super sharp. Egbuka's coming off a big game. Why Henderson over Egbuka in a flex spot in a half-point PPR league?
Man, it's just the matchups. They both got the opposite ends of the stick here. This is like worst case scenario for Egbuka. I have him in the 30s actually, so I know I'm a little off consensus. He's someone we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I really worry. I think that candidly, I think that having 2 Tampa Bay wide receivers against Houston in your top 24 is insane. I think that is wild behavior. I just can't do it. Houston, if I recall, gave up 30 plus points twice, maybe 3 times all of last season. Their pressure against the Rams. Now, Rams offensive line, nothing spectacular. But Atlanta's offensive line didn't perform, Tampa Bay's offensive line didn't perform all that well against Atlanta, who was running out rookie edge rushers against them. And if Baker, who was pressured on 40% of his dropbacks in week 1, that's happening against Atlanta, who was one of the worst pass rushers in the NFL last year, added to
improved from the draft.
These are NFL players in their first start. We just talked about how across the league that was not necessarily a recipe for success. Now, he was pressured on 40%. Atlanta also blitzed 40% of the time. So they had to get some help to do it. And because of that, Baker was able to do okay when pressured. However, Houston is a much, much different animal in that regard. They only blitzed 20-something% of the time against the Rams, and we're still a similar pressure rate, 40% of the time. I worry about this being a game where, due to both quarterbacks potentially being under siege, very similar to that Rams-Texans game, we just saw that the game script just becomes very short pass, very run heavy, and maybe the volume, just short passes, does help Egbuka. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just worried this is a game that I think, the over-under, I believe, is at 42. And I could see this being a pretty solid under pick personally. The Texans are not going to want to drop back a lot. And if their defense is able to force Tampa Bay to feel the same way, then this could be a very slow, very low scoring ball game.
No, and that's fair. The one thing I will say in that Rams game is that the Rams defense is much better than the Tampa Bay defense. I think I feel pretty confident in saying that. So I think that had partly to do with it. But for me, it is Egbuka. I mean, first of all, it's hard to bench a guy coming off a top 3 finish from the previous week. And grants you, yes, it was come down to 2 touchdowns, but he played all the snaps he played more than Mike Evans did. He ran more routes than Mike Evans did. He had more targets than Mike Evans did. So he was like the go-to one in that situation. I'm not saying it's going to be the case every week. Definitely not. And on paper, I agree with you, Adam. Yes, this is a tough matchup. The Houston Texans do have a legitimate defense here. But Puka finished in the top 7, and he had like 10 catches for 130 yards. And Adams, yes, I know he finished as wide receiver 45 on the week, but he had a pretty decent stat line. I mean, 4 catches, 54 yards. It wasn't like he was held completely out of it and came up in some big stretches there. So Egbuka, who's going to be running patterns more similar in my mind to Puka Nacua on top of it, I just don't see this being an issue for him. And on the flip side of that, and if anything, if you don't want to take it out of the Egbuka side, I don't feel confident in playing Travion Henderson as a flex guy. I think that's the other part of this. So Egbuka's in my top 24. Travion Henderson is not my top 24 of running backs. I have him more as a high-end RB3 heading into this matchup. And the problem is Henderson. And I knew this was going to be an issue in September. Like, Henderson's going to be fantastic once we get past like week 6. But I knew in September, Stevenson was going to be a problem. Stevenson had more snaps played than Henderson, 46-25. He had more routes run, which I think surprises people, given Henderson out-targeted him 23-18. He outplayed Henderson in situational football, too. Short down and distance, inside the 5, long down and distance, 2-minute drill. And they're playing Miami, which is a great matchup, and I get it. Henderson just needs to break 1, right? And it's Miami. It could easily happen. He doesn't need all kinds of touches in the world to break 1. I'm not going to argue that whatsoever. But it could also just be a positive game script for the Patriots, and they decide to run out the clock with Ramondre Stevenson, too. I think you're also kind of running that risk. I have no questions about what Egbuka is going to be playing time-wise. So when it boils down to it like that, that's why I wind up going with Egbuka. Chase, will let you judge this one. Well, before we do, hold on. How do we figure out a little showdown wager here? How do we figure this one out?
I mean, I think this one is simple. It's just who scored more, really.
Just who scored more? Okay, we can go with that. I didn't know if we want to go positions. That's fine. Who scores more in a half-point PPR? All right, that settles that. All right, Chase, go ahead.
All right. Well, Adam, you laid out some pretty convincing arguments. There was a reason behind why you picked Henderson, but you're wrong, friend. So I'm going to side with Dan on this. Now, I picked Egbuka as well. This is not a case of where I think that we're just overreacting to the nice performance last week. Like Dan said, Egbuka played more snaps than anybody on that offense outside of the offensive line and Baker. He played more than anyone else on that team. He took more snaps than anybody else. Like Dan said, he looked like he was actually the number one target in that game, and the numbers bore that out. And then, your argument about Stevenson and Henderson, and I've said it before with Henderson. I've used Henderson and Stevenson as an example where we all like the shiny new toy. Everybody in fantasy wants that shiny new toy. We all think about, okay, especially running back, we all think, oh, the young guy. Sometimes the guy that's there just has a handle on it, or at least has a handle on it temporarily until the young guy gets up to speed. Now, I agree with you, Dan. Henderson's going to have his time in this offense. I just don't think it's quite yet. Considering the fact he was outsnapped by Stevenson almost 2-1 last week. I have questions about how much we may or may not see him. And it's purely a volume thing in that regard, then, if you want to look at it that way. It's not that I don't think Travion Henderson can be successful, running the ball against Miami. I just think he's going to have to compete a lot more with somebody that plays his same position. And there's only going to be one of them on the field at the same time. Evans and Egbuka, I know darn well that they're both going to be on the field. I think that that's a game that Tampa Bay is going to have to keep throwing in, especially because they're playing a tough defense like that. So I agree with you on the Egbuka thing. I'm not comfortable with Henderson quite yet.
All right, I like it. All right, so let's move on here. Another question, and this one's near and dear to my heart. And I had Kittle in a bunch of places on top of being on my favorite team, but everybody and their mom's trying to figure out, all right, how do I replace George Kittle. And at first, I was going to use this question because one of the names in it is David Njoku. And Njoku is somebody that everybody should have been drafting. But then I'm in like 26 leagues. And I went through. And in half my leagues, people dropped David Njoku this past week. So he might actually be available on the waiver wire. So I was like, all right, this might be actually a valid question, or at least more so than I thought it was. So here's the question, boys. This guy's asking, all right, to replace George Kittle, should I go after Juwan Johnson, David Njoku, Jonnu Smith, Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert? So again, some tight ends I don't know if are available everywhere. Maybe he's got a couple of them. Doesn't really say. But if you had the pick of the litter, which tight ends, and we'll start with Chase, which tight end, I should say, would you use the most to replace George Kittle?
Yeah, this was an unexpectedly tough question for me because, like you, I have Kittle in one of my home leagues, and I was like, son of a gun, now I got to figure out a replacement for him. Of the names that are listed there, I'm taking David Njoku. I still think he has the highest ceiling out of any of them there, especially like we've talked about before. He was Joe Flacco's BFF towards the end of 2023. I still think that there's meat on the bone there for the Chief. And of the names that you listed, I like his ceiling better. So I will take Njoku. I will take the ceiling shot there over Juwan Johnson, who saw a bunch of targets last week. Jonnu Smith, because Arthur Smith, FAS, and Ferguson. I like the Cowboys to pass more. I like that they're going. I think that they're going to have to pass more this season. But I'm not so sure how that's gonna play out this week here. And Goddard, he's almost in Tyler Higbee territory for me, where I'm just ready to be done with him and never have to deal with him in my lineups again. So I'm going Njoku.
Funny being he was number one target in a Dallas game, but I kind of agree with you because I think people are overreacting to that. And Adam, just to be clear here, you also have Njoku.
Yes, correct. I think it's as simple as if Joe Flacco is going to pass 40 plus times in a 17-16 like ugly game, then he's going to throw 40 plus times every game. The one thing that did cause me to pause, did make me pause, is the Harold Fannin factor that I don't think any of us saw happening like it did last week. I know we all kind of liked Fannin or thought he was a pretty complete player coming into the draft process.
We don't have number 3. Okay. Let's get something straight here.
Right. But we all kind of agreed that we kind of liked him. But to see him taking that kind of volume, they deployed him all over the field. He lined up in line. He lined up out wide. He lined up in the slot. He lined up as a fullback. He took a flipping wildcat formation run, for crying out loud. They used him all over the field like he was their own personal Debo. And
Fannin was a slot receiver. That's basically what it boiled down to. So
exactly.
To your point, they played a lot of 12 personnel, mostly because Fannin was really kind of lined up as a slot receiver. The snaps were 65-55 in favor of Njoku. The routes run were 41-31 in favor of Njoku.
Yes, they were.
And out target him 9-5. I think the targets alone right there, to Adam's point about the 40 pass attempts, 14 targets go to the tight end position. More times than not, I think that's going to be flipped. There was nothing wrong with what David Njoku was doing or playing.
And I still like I said, I still like Njoku as a starter, but like we talked about a couple weeks ago on our tight end show, I had him as a top 5 option. I thought he was going to be a locked in top option outside of the big 3 that everybody wanted to take in the early rounds. I thought if you wanted to wait for a 5-round discount and take Njoku, you were going to get maybe commensurate value for him. Way bigger value, in fact, because you were going to get commensurate production out of him. I think that knowing that Fannin is there now, essentially taking that number 3 wide receiver role and running with it, I think that limits Njoku's ceiling a little bit more than what we had thought he was going to have when it was just him as Joe Flacco's best friend. So maybe that was the only thing that gave me pause.
Maybe not. Again, 14 targets to the position and still might be plenty left on the bone. I did want to make a quick mention, though, of Juwan Johnson, because I think this somebody is worth mentioning. I think there's somebody who could actually be a top 12 tight end, at least while Foster Moreau and Taysom Hill, who are both out on IR, are hurt. Because the guy played, and you want to talk about guys who played a lot? Right. He played an insane amount, 74 snaps. Like he played the most besides the quarterback in that game. 47 routes run, 11 targets out of Juwan Johnson. What's Juwan Johnson's real problem always been in his career? He never played enough. this is what he's going to do, if he's a full-time player now in this offense, it's always going to be trailing. It's always going to be a negative game script. I don't care if it is Spencer Rattler or Tyler Shuck. We're talking about Juwan Johnson as a at the very least a high-end tight end 2, a low-end tight end 1. So while my answer is David Njoku, I at least wanted to make mention that Juwan Johnson needs to be on your radar if you're looking to replace the tight end position. All right, let's get into the next question here, where you and Adam, Chase and Adam, are going to kind of go back hand in hand here and go back and forth. So the next one was he needs 2 wide receivers and a flex out of this group, which was T. Higgins, Davante Adams, Emeka Egbuka, RJ Harvey, and Travis Etienne. And I think we all agreed RJ Harvey kind of goes off the list here when you're talking about this group of players. I thought the battle in this question was going to be between Egbuka and Etienne, but you two are different in a different way. So Chase, you have Higgins, Etienne, and Egbuka, but Adam, you have T. Higgins, Davante Adams, and Etienne. So you both actually agree on Etienne. It's just whether it's Egbuka or whether it's Davante Adams. So Adam, why Adams?
Yeah, I think that the Rams situation was a byproduct of playing the Texans. I think it's the Texans is going to be the common denominator, not necessarily the Rams and not necessarily like any of the other parts of it. I'm still cool with Adams. I thought Stafford actually, for as much concern as I had coming into the season with his health, I thought he looked a lot better than I expected him to. That offensive line certainly isn't great, but the situation isn't going to get much worse than playing against the Houston Texans. So I still feel good about Davante Adams. Puka also got his, he'll be running with a questionable tag for ever because he can't stay healthy. He'll be fine. He'll play, but I'm sure that they're monitoring his situation closely, I guess is what I'll say with Puka. So I just feel a little bit more confident about Davante Adams. I think at the state of his career, he's a pretty weakly consistent wide receiver 2 type of guy that I'm going to peg in that range. And Egbuka was someone who last week I was one of the few people that had him as a wide receiver 2. And I guess this week I'm one of the few people that does not. I've just been playing matchups with him. I'm going to continue doing it until he has put up the sample size of I'm a matchup outlier. I do not care about matchups. I think that you earned that, and I'm not going to not move you because of matchups at this point in his career. Because he was someone I raised last week because he had a good matchup.
I mean, Tennessee, they played really good defense against Denver. Bonix sucks. All right, sorry, I had to get that.
that part. I'm not. I don't think that was a Tennessee thing that happened there.
I had to get that off my chest because it was sitting pretty. All right, Chase. So why do you go Egbuka over Davante Adams? Adams, even though he's older, it didn't look like he was missing much of a step to me.
No, it didn't look like he was missing much of a step. He played well. In fact, I mean, we had obviously there was a little bit of the injury scare there for Nakua, but he played the most snaps of any of the receivers on that team, which I think was a little bit of a surprise. Honestly, to me, it was a little bit of a surprise that Adams played the most snaps of anybody on that in that receiver core, being the new guy in. Part of me worries maybe a little bit that he's not quite on the same page yet with Matthew Stafford. I mean, he saw 8 targets in the game. If he continues to see 8 targets a game, Davante Adams is going to get his, and I agree. He's a wide receiver 2. He only caught 4 of them, 51 yards. It wasn't that great a game. And you talked about the idea that, okay, it might have been the Houston defense that limited Davante Adams last week. Yeah, but we just talked about it earlier. In fact, Dan brought it up, and I agree with him. I think Egbuka is much more Puka Nacua in against that Houston team and in the Tampa Bay offense. And Puka Nacua himself had 10 catches for 11 targets for 130 yards and actually was a wide receiver 1 last week. So just between the two of them, I still think that I like Ibuka's, I like the way Egbuka matches up with them. I think they're going to have to keep throwing there. I'm a little worried that maybe Adams isn't quite on the same page. And I'm a little worried, to be dead honest with you, I'm a little worried that maybe they won't have to quite throw as much against Tennessee. And if they don't have to throw as much, then Adams isn't going to be seen as much. It's close for me. It really is. I have Davante Adams ranked at wide receiver 21 this week. And I've got Egbuka at wide receiver 19. It's not like I've got a ton of space between them. It's just between the two. I'm willing to take the upside on Egbuka this week based on, honestly, weirdly enough, reverse of Adam based on the matchups.
So I'll be the tiebreaker here. I'm exactly in line with Adam here. I also had T. Higgins, Davante Adams, and Travis Etienne. And mostly because of this reason, Chase, you mentioned the matchup, how much are they going to have to throw? Tennessee's not a team you can run easily on. Like, I don't think Kyron Williams is going to have much of an efficient day. He might get a touchdown because they always seem to get Kyron the ball inside the 5-yard line come hell or high water. But so he'll be fine for you fantasy wise. He's still I think he's a top 13, 12 running back for me still this week, regardless. But the move the ball against Tennessee, it's better if you can throw it. And Davante Adams just looks so good to me. Now to your point, I think I have maybe 3 spots of space between Adams and Egbuka. I got Egbuka as wide receiver 21. I got Davante Adams at wide receiver 18 for the week. So it's real close. I got them both inside my top 24. For me, I thought this was going to be, again, about Travis Etienne or Emeka Egbuka. And I kind of wanted to mention Travis Etienne here real quick. I mean, we had the news about the Tank Bigsby trade. First of all, that does wonders for this backfield because now we know it's Travis Etienne until Bashaw Tutin gets some work in. And that might still be a minute before that really happens because Bashaw Tutin can't pass protect. So until he can at least be somewhat competent in that area, I don't know how much he definitely takes over. Maybe they do something along the lines that Cohen did last year where they just let Tuin play early downs and let Travis Etienne be the Rashad White of that team. But after the way Etienne ran last week, and I get it was against Carolina, but there's no way he's losing touches after a performance like that. And when I'm looking at Etienne, like he's my running back 16. So he's going in for me over Egbuka, but Adams, I do have him playing a little bit there. Okay, so let's talk about another tight end question. And this was start Travis Kelce or sit him and go with either Dallas Goedert or Juwan Johnson. And I just want to say this. Look, I get it. Travis Kelce didn't look great. He did not look like he was in the shape of his 20s, as Andy Reid tried to have you believe in the offseason. Okay. But if you had a brain, you knew that wasn't going to actually be the case. To me, I think it gets a little bit better this week going into it, knowing that you have to game plan to have Travis Kelce be more heavily involved with Xavier Worthy. I would have to suspect most likely to miss. Make sure you tune in tomorrow with my episode with Dr. Brian Scott. We'll talk about the Xavier Worthy injury. So I think he's going to get worked in a little bit. Like, I don't think you can keep just targeting Hollywood Brown 14 times a game and think that's going to be okay for your only weapon. Kelce was still out there. Like, he played 58 snaps. He had 38 routes run. He could have had 2 touchdowns had he not stopped running on the one crossing pattern that Mahomes had him wide open on. So he could have even had a bigger day. And get this, guys, as much as Travis Kelce didn't look good, didn't play well, he still finished as tight end 3 last week. It didn't do anything, like besides sport. So you drafted Travis Kelce, you played Travis Kelce. I think you just stick with that. Chase and Adam, you both agree it is Kelce for this conversation. So let's move on to the defense here. This person's thinking about dropping the Vikings defense for the Rams or the 49ers defense this week. And I think this is a twofold question. One, I mean, would you do that for this week? Which one do you prefer? But also, two, you drafted the Vikings defense. You probably did it before that 15th, 16th round. You probably did thinking that they would be your defense throughout the year and you wouldn't be streaming defenses like everybody else. So I think this is also a philosophical question from that standpoint too. So Adam, I'm going to kick this to you.
Yeah. Personally, I would consider cutting them. My reason being is you've got Cincinnati next week. If it was just tanking the 1 week, then I would probably want to not lose my value. But at this point, it seems like you're just going to be in the whole 3 weeks because you're probably not going to want to play them. If you don't want to play them this week, you're not going to want to play them against Cincinnati. I think that's going to be the reality of the situation because the Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense we saw this past week, they normally get over that by the time we hit week 3. Like I've made the mistake of forgetting that Joe Burrow can't do anything week 1, and that's been the case for the last 3 years. It doesn't matter. I think the week 1 Joe Burrow just sucks, and week 1 Zach Taylor sucks. So that's a different conversation. Point being, I think the Bengals would be back to normal by that point, and the Vikings are tough. The matchups are tough. Great defense. You did draft them, but ultimately, I think it's a case of sunken cost fallacy. Like, you just got to let it go. If you're not going to play them this week, you're not going to play them next week. You don't want 2 defenses on your roster. Take your lump now, get it over with, win the next 2 weeks. And if the Vikings sucks, or Vikings defense sucks the next 2 weeks because of those matchups, they'll probably be available because nobody's going to go roster the ranked 22nd defense.
No, that is fair. So which one, real quick, Rams 49ers, are you dropping them for?
I would probably want to go with the Niners. Rams, I think, are probably a little bit better this week, although just barely. And really, that's just because the Saints throw so much. That makes it a little funky. As much as I think that they're probably going to get some turnovers, like the points can get weird. But I think on the whole, I'd rather have the Niners.
Yeah, so and Chase, I think you agree with this, what I was going to say. First of all, I'm a guy who streams defenses. Yep. It's also the one position when I am drafting and I get to that point, I will really pay attention to strength of schedule, because if I can grab a defense, that's going to be the first few weeks, I feel like I can play them without having to worry about it, then great, all the merrier. Adam, I'm in total agreement with you. I think the Rams right now actually are my number 2 defense on the week. 49ers are my 5th, though, so it's not much of a gap. But here's what you're dealing with after that. Like the Rams
is a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. Like you got the Rams, so they play Tennessee this week, right? And then 49ers play the Saints. So you have that's going on really well. But then the 49ers play Arizona, and then they even play Jacksonville, who against Carolina, while they won that game, didn't necessarily look super sharp. Trevor Lawrence still looks like he's going to be a bit of a turnover machine. The Rams play the Eagles week 3, and then they play the Colts week 4, which if the Colts can just stay balanced, that could be interesting in and of its own right, although Daniel Jones can give up some turnover. So for me, I'm looking at San Francisco. Chase, real quick, which one would you take here?
For the week, like I said, I'm a streamer at DST too, so I wouldn't have drafted the Vikings in the first place. I'd probably be looking elsewhere anyway, but the Rams are a 1 week solution. I like them this week. I have them ranked at number 2. I have the 49ers ranked at number 3. So for the week, I'll take the Rams, but I agree that the Niners might have multiple week juice here instead of just being a 1 week wonder.
Yeah, and my mic is trying to attack me while we're doing this. So I'm trying to keep it moving here. All good. All right. So we got to the questions. Keep those questions coming. We'll go through that segment every single week. Let's talk a little bit about where we're different versus ECR this week, gentlemen. Chase, I'm going to go right back to you. Who's the number 1 guy that you have a big difference with ECR this week in your rankings?
Number 1 guy, and I know some people will accuse me of being a homer here, but my number 1 guy that's different from ECR is Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers. I have him at wide receiver 36, so I have him as a fringe wide receiver 3, but the entire rest of the world thinks that he's down in the 50s somewhere. So I'm 16 points over ECR with him there. I just think you look at Romeo Doubs, he's still the top receiver on that team. He's in terms of playing time, in terms of snaps, in terms of looks, Romeo Doubs is still the lead receiver on the Green Bay Packers until and unless Matthew Golden or a healthy Christian Watson, which we may never see, until someone takes that title from him. Romeo Doubs, even with all his head case problems, even with all his head trauma problems, is still that number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay. So I think that he has the ability to score some points there. Like I said, I've got him as a fringe wide receiver 3. I don't see big things out of Romeo Doubs. I still don't want any of the Packers wide receivers or frankly, any of their pass catchers on my roster or in my starting lineup at least. But Romeo Doubs is my biggest discrepancy there.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find it here because I don't think we're much. Well, I have him at 45, so I have him as a wide receiver 4. But if you're playing 3 receivers,
he's still ahead.
Still might be a flex. The point is that he played the most, and this is what we knew about Romeo Doubs as far as actual stable snap playing time. We knew he was going to be the most stable out of all the Packer wide receivers. Matthew Golden is not on the injury designation list now, but he was a little bit. So he got a little bit banged up. He only played 1 more snap than Tavian Wicks. That was the disappointing point there. We'll see if that changes. But this Commander secondary is one that I definitely think you can take advantage of. So I'm not going to argue with that one too much. Adam, what's the biggest difference you're finding yourself on? Besides Egbuka, because you've already hammered him into the ground.
Yeah, we've had that conversation. For me, it is Kenneth Walker with ECR still having him as, if I can pull it up really quick, I believe it was 24, and I have him at 30. I think they have him like 8 spots ahead of Charbonnet, who outsnapped him like 30 to 21. I think that is bizarre. I liked Walker a lot coming into the season, and I'm not killing him completely. I still have him, like I said, at 30, so nothing crazy, but to have him significantly ahead of Charbonnet at this point, like, I just don't think there's any evidence to do that. Realistically, I'd be concerned that it flips even further, just given the snap count went the way that it did, and Kenneth Walker is actually the one that had the better receiving workload, which I don't think any of us would think that is sustainable. I think if Charbonnet takes the job, he gets receiving too, because realistically, he's at least the better pass blocker, if not the all-around better receiver. So that situation is one that I'm going to be monitoring for at least the next month for sure. I think there's a lot of ramifications there. But yeah, I think confidently playing Kenneth Walker as an RB2 this week is a little much for my blood personally.
So this one hits kind of close to home. So I'm going to ask you a question on the fly here, Adam.
Yeah.
Because I have a league where I have Kenneth Walker and I have Zach Charbonnet.
Ooh.
Now, because thankfully it sounds like Drake London's going to play, I have Jameson Williams as a potential flex. And then we're talking about Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet in the flex. So between those three, what would you do?
I think for me, it's between... I think I'd want to go Jameson. The thing with Walker and Charbonnet is I'm still not 100% certain it will be Charbonnet. I'm not killing off Walker. So I just have them RB 30 and 31. I have them off on the road. I'm like, one of you is probably going to be the guy. One of you is going to beat this, but I can't confidently say which one yet. So I'm just going to put you over here. Jameson, I think, is going to have a bounce back week. I think Detroit's going to have a bounce back week. They're at Detroit, or they're like in Detroit. They're home in a stadium. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I tend to lead that way for me personally. Look, with the Kenneth Walker stuff, some of it could be, look, he did not practice a lot throughout training camp, right? He kind of really just got back into practice for week 1. And some of that was, well, we didn't know how injured he really was, whether just being careful with him. But regardless, he clearly didn't have his legs under him, so, and they Kenneth Walker started the game. It was just, he wasn't able to really get going here. Charbonnet, while not overly successful, was more successful. But then I look at what the Jets did to the Steelers. And I look at what Breece Hall did. And I look at the type of runs that they attacked the Steelers with, of which Breece Hall was successful. That fits more what Kenneth Walker does in that offense. I also think Seattle has Kubiak in particular, has a bit of a bounce back in week 2, because he did not call a very good game in week 1 either with his play calling. So I do kind of go back and forth, but I'm with you right now, just based on what we saw in week 1. I still think Kenneth Walker is the lead guy in this backfield when it's all said and done. But for week 2 coming up right now, there's really no telling either way. To your point, I don't have them one space apart, but I only do have 3 spaces apart, both as RB3s this week. Kenneth Walker 28, Zach Charbonnet RB 31. So I'm kind of with you on that standpoint. It's a little crazy for them to be too far apart. It's a little crazy to be too confident in either one or the other two. And the Steelers, I got to think, run defense wise, will be better than what we saw in week 1 too. The defense is too good to just be run on all over. Let's get into my guy. So my top guy is actually Caleb Williams. And I'm shocked, because Williams, especially from a fantasy standpoint, was pretty good in Monday. 58 yards on the ground, a touchdown. Yes, most of it came with his legs. I know he only had 210 yards passing and 1 touchdown there. But he finished the QB 9 on the week, and yet ECR is ranking him at QB 17. I got him at QB 11 heading into this one. It's a well-coached, good Minnesota defense that he came out firing on, at least during the scripted part of the game. But what stuck out to me the most, and this was the debate all off season long between multiple people, was Ben Johnson, who loves playing on time, going to allow Caleb Williams to be a playmaker and a dual threat? And we got the answer. The answer was yes, because to me, and I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but Caleb Williams looked like he had actually gotten faster this year as a rusher. And I don't think he actually got faster. What I think the difference is that he got more decisive. And that's coming from the coaching staff, because when the lane was open, he did not hesitate to take it and take off and run. That means the coaching staff is not in your ear telling you to play on time. They're not telling you to not scramble around. That's coach saying, like, look, you don't see it. You see a lane, go ahead and take it. If Caleb Williams is suddenly going to become a dual threat, which he is capable of doing, now we're talking about a whole new ceiling to floor ratio with Caleb Williams coming into this, beyond the Ben Johnson offense, beyond the weapons that Chicago has this season. And with the tough schedule they have to start, that could be the difference between Caleb Williams finishing as, potentially a QB 6 or a QB 15 this year. So I like Caleb a lot in this game too, going against Detroit, who I think in Detroit will have a little bit of a comeback. I think this is going to be a little bit more of a higher scoring matchup, another divisional matchup. And Ben Johnson's licking his chops to prove himself against Dan Campbell. So I think we'll have a few extra things up his sleeve. Yeah, Caleb Williams is somebody I'm starting as a top 12 quarterback. You guys can react to that.
Ooh. Okay. I have him ranked at 19. I have him just below his ECR. Yeah, he finishes as QB9. I think the biggest reason I have him ranked around ECR, maybe even a little bit lower, is not necessarily a Caleb Williams thing as it is a everybody else thing. I don't think Joe Burrow is going to continue to be quarterback 25. I don't think Jared Goff is going to continue to be quarterback 23. I don't think that, Drake May, Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels, all these guys are going to continue to be as low as they are. I think they raise up. And I think that, especially this week against Detroit, yeah, could he have a great game? He definitely could. He looked pretty good the other night. You're right. He did. He looked pretty good the other day. But I don't know. I need to see a sustained effort from him. I need to see it happen over multiple weeks before I'm ready to buy completely into Caleb Williams as a starting caliber option in the top 12. Superflex, I love him to death. I've got him in several of my dynasty leagues and I'm starting him in all of them. But I'm not necessarily sure he's ready for that kind of prime time. And that QB9, like I said, that QB9 ranking last week, there's a lot of context there between all the names that were behind him. Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith looked really good last week, and I think he can have another good game. I'm not ready to go there yet with him.
Look, some of those names you mentioned, yes, they're not going to finish as low as they did in week 1, but at the same time, Caleb scored 24 points. It was legit, the amount of points that he put up in. So I think what we have here... Let's do it again, Chase. Let's do it. Let's see double or nothing. Let's see.
If Caleb's a number one, if Caleb is a QB1 this week,
hold on, because you got him all the way down at QB 19. I got him at QB 11. It was a back end one. Let's not get a little carried away here.
All right. Well,
let's top 14. If he's 15 or less, he's you. Top 14, he's me. How about that? I think that's fair.
All right.
We'll take that.
I think that handicaps towards you a little bit, but I'll take it. I'm willing to go there.
I'm giving you more. It's 3 spots lower than my rankings, and you're getting 4 extra spots. It's more towards you, if anything. Chase is back walking it. Look,
I'm not back walking. I'm saying no. Okay, where do you have him ranked?
Welcome that. I'm 11.
You have him at 11. I have him at 19, and we're talking. Where's the line we drew?
14. If he's 14 or higher, he's me. If he's 15 or lower, he's you.
So he had, okay. Well,
that's pretty fair, amigo.
I'll take it.
Take it over a drink on the happy hour.
That I can agree to. I can definitely do that. All right. So hey, for the DFS cocktail this week. Well, we made a couple of right calls last week. I guess I was right on Cedric Tillman being the receiver to have off of the Browns there. It was just such a weird week league wide, though. You kind of have to throw all the numbers out the window from last week. So we look at the slate this week. It's kind of a low scoring week. Vegas doesn't seem to see a lot of points being scored this week. The highest over under that I've got based on the numbers over at Sharp Football Analysis there is the Jacksonville Cincinnati game at 48.5 in terms of the Sunday early slate and through the Sunday night slate there. So not big lines there. Chicago, Detroit's at 47, Philadelphia and Kansas City are at 47. I'm not necessarily sure we see all of that happen. And there are, though, a couple of touchdown favorites here. In fact, there's one real big favorite here in Baltimore, Cleveland. Baltimore is an 11.5 point favorite over Cleveland. But of the other games that are touchdown games there, we've got the Jets and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are 6.5 point favorites. Detroit is a 6 point favorite over Chicago. And Dallas is a 6 point favorite over the Giants. And then there's a 6.5 point favorite in the desert as Arizona hosts the Carolina Panthers. So I want to look at these higher numbers, these higher over under totals for our pass game on our DFS cocktail. And we are going to go with and start things off with Mr. Jalen Hurts at quarterback for 6,800. He is not the most expensive quarterback on the docket this week, but if you look at what he did last week, I mean, 19 out of 23 was very efficient, 152 yards only. He was kind of a check down merchant last week. Didn't throw a touchdown pass, but again, 14 rushes, 62 yards, 2 touchdowns. The tush push thing is alive and well, which means that Jalen Hurts' fantasy prospects are alive and well there. When you look at what they did last time they played each other in the Super Bowl there, Jalen Hurts, 17 out of 22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had an interception, but 11 rushes, 72 yards, and that score. Last week, Kansas City Chiefs allowed 318 pass yards to Mr. Justin Herbert there. I don't think they give up that many passing yards this week, but the big key is they allowed him to also run 7 times for 32 yards. If they can give up seven rushes and 32 yards to Justin Herbert, I got to think that Jalen Hurts can do some damage on that offense. So I'm very comfortable paying the 6,800 for Jalen Hurts this week at quarterback. So then I'm going to want to take one of his wide receivers there and stack on top of him. And I am going to take not Mr. A.J. Brown. I'm going to take Davante Smith. Davante Smith back in the Super Bowl against them last year, 4 out of 5, 69 yards and a score. He was actually their leading receiver yards wise. Their leading receiver in terms of looks and in terms of catches was actually Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. But Smith was the one who had the most yardage. He had the nice big long 40. I think it was a 46 yarder there too as well. But the Chiefs did allow the most points in the league last week to the Chargers wide receivers. I mean, Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey ran all over them. They were all wide open. I'm going to take Davante Smith at 5,600. He's a little bit cheaper than A.J. Brown, and I think that he can find some open spots in that lineup there. But we are going to take a Brown in this game. We're going to play back against him on the other side of things for the Chiefs with Hollywood Brown at 5,200. I love Hollywood Brown this week. You mentioned he had the absolute, monster game target-wise last week with the worthy injury button hooking us all right off the bat there. Hollywood Brown, 10 out of 16 last week, 99 yards, didn't score, but 10 out of 16. If he's going to continue to see double-digit targets, somebody has to see targets in this offense. Somebody has to. And with Rashee Rice out, Xavier Worthy is not going to go on the IL, it doesn't look like, but he's not going to play this week. And even if he does play, he's not playing anything significant. There's no way that he plays a significant enough role in terms of like what they actually throw to him. He'd be running decoy routes. I like Hollywood Brown in this game a lot. Last week, you talk about what the Eagles did. They allowed CeeDee Lamb to go for 7 catches and 110 yards. CeeDee Lamb actually was having a pretty decent game until that horrific, drop at the end that kind of cost them. But I think Hollywood Brown finds open spots against this against this Eagles defense. I like the idea of this. If this does turn into the shootout that Vegas sees it as, I like Brown and Smith, in a kind of a little guy duel there. And then we're going to round things out for our lineup here with Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. We're going to pay up for him at 7,400. I think he's the 6th most expensive running back on the slate this week. But his last time out against Chicago, he had 23 rushes, 109 yards and a score. He had added 4 more catches for 45 more yards there. I think he has to have a bounce back week. I think if they're going to be successful against the Chiefs, or against the Bears, that Gibbs is going to have a good game. He's going to have that bounce back game. It's not like he didn't get the usage last week. It's not like he saw the same amount of usage he always sees last week. The Packers just shut that entire offense down. Now there's offensive line problems in Detroit, but I think that they're going to have to use Gibbs. I think he has a bounce back game. The Bears allowed the 8th most points to running backs in the league last week. Jones and Mason combined for 18 rushes, 91 yards. They caught all 4 of their targets for 51 yards. And of course, Jones had that big touchdown towards the end of the game there that kind of turned things around for them. So if that's what they're going to do to, no offense, I love Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, but they're not Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a lot that he can do there. So while I mix up this drink that we are going to call the Domination Depth Charge, I'm going to need you guys to look and talk about the idea of going with some of these names here. Hurts, Smith, Brown, Gibbs. Is there anybody else that you guys want to add in there, or that you would like more than those guys? Do you disagree with me on any of that? But you go ahead. I'll mix this up, and then I'll explain what drink I'm mixing as we after you're done.
Well, Adam, what jumps out to me first is that Jalen Hurts in DFS is not a quarterback you have to stack. And because of the way this Eagles offense functions, where you really never know who it's going to be. It could be Devonta Smith. It could be A.J. Brown. It could be Dallas Goedert. It could be a Saquon Barkley week. But I know Jalen Hurts is going to score points. I don't feel like he's somebody we got to stack. And if you want to stack a runner, well, the guy I feel confident about stacking would be Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson. Fields sitting at 5,700. Garrett Wilson sitting at 6,500. Fields made it clear, look, I'm going to gun it to my number one guy. Like he made it clear with DJ Moore. He made it clear last week. So if you're looking for a runner quarterback to stack, I think that's the stack I'm kind of leaning towards. I also want to make sure we add in Ricky Pearsall here to the mix, because he might be in the same vein as a Hollywood Brown. He's only $100 more, 5,300 compared to Hollywood Brown's 52. And Juwan Jennings may play in this game, may not. At best, he's going to be banged up. No George Kittle. Mac Jones might be playing in this game. Mac Jones is only going to throw the ball to one guy. He's not going to be mixing around to anybody else. He's not going to mix it to Kendrick Bourne and all whatever nonsense they would have. He's going to be throwing the ball to the one guy, and they're playing against the Saints. So I think Ricky Pearsall is really in line for a big game too, and I like his matchup maybe better than Hollywood Browns. I still think Hollywood Brown probably comes away with more volume because I think the Chiefs will throw the ball more. But he might have Pearsall, who was super efficient last week, might have a really efficient game again this week. So those are some of the things that jumped out to me. What jumped out to you, Adam?
Yeah, you mentioned Garrett Wilson. He was someone who, as I was looking with the money left over from some of your guys, Garrett Wilson was someone that I was like, well, if I go cheap with like a Dylan Sampson, then I can have Garrett Wilson as an extra receiver and feel really, really good about it. So either way, I think Garrett Wilson's a great player like him. Pearsall is a good mention. Yeah, I like it.
No, I like all of those names. I'm not going to argue with anything you said there. The thing that I liked about the core four that I just kind of threw out there was that they were affordable, and they did allow you to spend up at some of those other positions if you wanted to. So yeah, Smith and Brown. I mean, you're not even spending $1,100 for your wide receiver. You're starting for two of your starting wide receivers. I like that idea. Yeah. So I'm not going to argue with any of your points there. So the domination depth charge, real quick here before we end things. If you guys have had, if any of you have had the old school Jaeger bomb or a lunchbox or depth charge, a real Irish, depth charge, or they used to call it a different name, but we won't mention that on air. It's a little insensitive. It's one of those. This is one of those shots. It's a drink. It's a shot. Actually, it's meant to be taken as a shot, but you're going to fill your glass with a stout. And so for this one, for the domination depth charge, we're going with Dragon's Milk. Some of you guys, if you've seen my stuff, if you watch my baseball show, if you've seen me on other shows, you know the Dragon's Milk is one of my favorites. It's a bourbon barrel aged stout here. 11% alcohol by volume. It's a heavy beer. So this is not one that you need to, sit by the pool all day long, but you're going to fill up your glass with that. Then you're going to take just an old school regular shot glass. You're going to fill that most of the way with a bourbon. I told you that the Dragon's Milk is a bourbon barrel aged stout. So I'm going to use a bourbon. I'm using actually Border Bourbon, which is a local bourbon here from Northwest Wisconsin. But you're going to fill up a shot glass most of the way with that. And then on top of that, we're going to drop some Jackson Morgan Southern Cream, brown sugar and cinnamon liqueur. This is kind of like in the same vein as a rum chata, as a Irish cream, but this one is made with Tennessee whiskey and it's brown sugar and cinnamon flavor. So you're going to top the shot glass off with that. Then you're going to take that shot glass off. You're going to drop that into the drink here. You're going to drink that all in one shot here. Here goes the Operation Domination depth charge.
Chug, 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 chug.
Very nice.
Well done, sir.
Don't let that sit in there too long because that cream will curdle on you. But there it is. Domination depth charge.
For those of you listening on the podcast, Chase just chugged an entire like whiskey glass full. So that was not a shot. So good job by you, buddy. That's going to wrap up the show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you come back. I'll be with Dr. Brian Scott tomorrow, talk about the injury inquiries heading into week 2. And then I'll be back on Saturday with Chaz Florida Sports Betting Weekly, talk about some of our best bets of the week. Catch my article. We'll be dropping the week 2 player props. I'm going to have 1 prop per game lock on that article on The Huddle. So go to thehuddle.com and make sure you check that out for me. It should be dropping Saturday morning at some point. Guys, as always, download Operation Domination, your favorite podcast app, and check out the video content here on the YouTube channel, the Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net. Good luck, and we'll see you soon.